Whenever people agree to communicate with each other, there are certain standards or protocols that must be agreed upon. For example, when one person speaks, the other listens, and people don't talk at the same time. Just commonly agreed upon courtesies and feedback that we have in order to make that communication happen. The same is true also with networks, and even more so, because we're not human. The computers are not humans that are working with the transmission of the data. So protocol is just a system of rules for communication that networks need to obey. So protocols specify several things, such as the format of the data that's going to be composed within a message, the address of a sender and receiver, and all the different kinds of properties that go into defining a message that's going to be transmitted. So communication can flow very well when these protocols are similar to human conversation. So when humans communicate, they have to agree upon a common spoken language. If one person's speaking in French or German and the other is speaking in English or Spanish, that may not be a way to communicate without a translation between the two. So agreeing upon a common language is very useful. The speaking order, in terms of, as I mentioned before, interrupting each other. One person may go and then wait for the next person and back and forth, and being able to even have a priority of an urgent message. These are all kinds of things that also go into the rules that compose a protocol. And being able to make sure that there's fairness, so not one person being kind of a long talker and monopolizing all the conversation, allowing others to have a turn to also communicate is very important. So TCP/IP is the transmission control protocol or the internet protocol, and it's one of the most fundamental parts of how the internet works. Enables the connectivity between different computers, and it's a common worldwide standard for communicating between different parts of the internet. There's interestingly a way that abstraction comes into play here. If you look on the right side of this slide, if you imagine there's two hosts that are trying to communicate, connected by various routers, the way that the data flows is typically down through these abstraction layers, from the application layer down to the link layer. And there may be communication across, for example, what's called the application layer here. But these abstraction layers that you see going vertically down are from higher level kind of concerns down to lower level things, such as really low level transmission media and standards for things like error correction. So that's how the internet has abstractions and layers built upon it. The application layer is the highest layer, followed by something called the transport, internet, and link layer. In CS principles, it's an exclusion to be able to go into a lot of detail on these. I just mentioned that this concept just to highlight that abstraction is very important even in the internet in terms of being able to focus on specific concerns at different levels of interest. An example of an application layer protocol is a very popular one known as HTTP, or the Hypertext Transfer Protocol. That's the protocol used between web browsers to be able to make requests, to get and post requests, and be able to obtain information and get a response from a server about a request from a particular client. Another example of the application layer is SMTP, the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. This is a standard protocol that helps define email communication between email servers and email clients and so on. FTP is another example at the application level that's often used to help transfer files from clients to servers and back and forth. So these are just three examples of protocols that exist at that highest level called the application layer. The transport layer has some very important protocols as well. So TCP, the Transmission Control Protocol, it's one of the two protocols that provide the fundamental core of how the internet works. So being able to understand how messages are broken down and assembled, and it's one of the most common things and the most common accepted standard for communicating on the internet. And being able to detect information transmission errors and helping to ensure reliable communication is another important part of TCP. There's an alternative called UDP. So UDP is the User Datagram Protocol, and it occurs whenever, or it's often used whenever the actual delivery of each packet is not vital. So this is very useful where there may be some real-time or streaming information, such as video or voice over IP, where it may be okay to drop a few packets here and there, because if a human is listening to the message, they can fill in the blanks, versus totally waiting too long and missing the signal. So if you're speaking with someone, you'd rather be able to achieve and pick up as many packets as you can, where it's okay to drop a few, rather than just waiting until you have all the packets. By that time, the other person has moved on in the conversation. So the ability to do streaming and these kinds of activities is very important with UDP. So that concludes the whole lesson on the internet. Very quick overview of what networks are, basic terminology, some of the history of the internet, how the internet works in terms of packet switching, being able to talk and understand about domain name servers, IP addresses, and all these different types of protocols that we just covered are sort of the fundamental things that your students should come away with knowing when they are looking at the internet. And things they might discuss. You know, we discussed IP addresses. What happens when we get close to running out of IP addresses? You know, is that possible? And what happens? And what are some things that are being done even now of IPv6 to accommodate that? So these are all discussion topics that you can have them explore in cooperative learning styles. Issues earlier about things like privacy in terms of packet sniffers. These also bring out discussion topics in terms of the need for privacy. So hopefully these last 3 lessons provide a general context in which you can introduce the internet to your students and provide a fruitful platform for their discussion.